right, viewers, let's now move ahead to some more breaking news updates coming in as far as the war goes in West Asia. Now, US President Donald Trump is saying that the country will leave Iran in 2 to 3 weeks when they are certain the regime cannot build a nuclear weapon for years. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump said Iran is begging to make a deal, but whether it happens or not is irrelevant to America's timetable. Earlier, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian had also said that Tehran had the necessary will to end the war, provided its enemies guaranteed it would not flare up again. However, missiles continue to be fired from both sides, with Iran striking the US 5th Fleet base in Bahrain and the Kuwait International Airport, while US-Israeli strikes hit Tehran and Beirut. I'm now joined in the discussion by Air Marshal Ravi Gopal Krishna Kapoor, who is Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Central Air Command. Thanks very much for joining us in this discussion. It's a pleasure to have you on NewsX.
Thank you.
Air Marshal Kapoor, the ongoing West Asia conflict has seen extensive use of precision airstrikes. Bunker buster munitions were also used in large-scale missile drone barrages by both sides. From your decades of experience in fighter operations and air power employment, how critical is achieving air superiority in a multi-front theater like this? And what lessons does the degradation of Iran's air defenses and naval assets offer for modern conflicts?
Thank you for having me on the show, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Air power is inherently offensive by nature, and if it is not used offensively, defensively you can never win a war in air. So precision weapons today are extremely important in achieving the outcomes that are desired, and that is how this campaign started initially. Drones have a place in the whole gamut. They can produce strategic outcomes in terms of targeting. And what we have seen in this whole conflict in the last 1 month or so is that if US and Israel did not have the long-range precision strike or the capability to completely substantially degrade the Iranian air defense, the cost of war on Israel and US would have been very, very high. It is because they were able to degrade the long-range air defense or the medium-range air defense of Iran that they have been able to now move from long-range precision weapons to one could say short-range air-to-ground munitions, and in fact be able to operate overhead. So air superiority may not be, air supremacy we cannot say, because we have seen in this war that there have been cases where the US or Israeli aircraft have been targeted by the air defense of Iran, because it is virtually impossible to eliminate the entire air defense because it is mobile, highly mobile, and it can be secured. Secondly, the difference between Iran and US has been the basic philosophy. Iran has primarily used asymmetric tactics. They have developed that entire philosophy to counter the US and Israeli air attacks. And so they only find those windows of opportunity where they can exploit and create a kind of notion of victory. And by constantly hitting the targets in the Gulf countries, they have demonstrated that however important air defense is, it can still be overwhelmed by innovative tactics, innovative use of weapons, and constantly changing the tactics. So we saw that instead of using the ballistic missiles as a single warhead, which they had done in the 12-day war, they changed it to the cluster munitions, which actually overwhelmed the Iron Dome or the entire air defense of the system. They also were able to, target the THAAD acquisition radar. which created a major gap in the US air defense network. And
Okay.
so by doing these, they were able to create effects which greatly reduce the efficacy of US. Similarly, on the defensive side, they have been able to secure their launchers, secure their air defense systems, missiles, and the drones in a manner where they use this shoot and scoot tactics. That they just come out, shoot, and then go, and
Yes.
then they are able to overwhelm the air defenses by creating those gaps and using innovative tactics. But at the same time, the basic bedrock of this whole campaign is intelligence. And I think Iran is getting some intelligence which is allowing it to target the assets in the Gulf nations, or which are the US assets, or even the Gulf refineries or other assets very, very precisely.
Okay, that brings me to my next question here, Marshal Kapoor. With the US and Israel conducting deep strikes on the nuclear sites in Iran, it's of course leadership targets and missile infrastructure, while Iran and its proxies retaliate against the bases in the Gulf and Israel, how do you assess the role of the strategic air campaigns versus the proxy warfare in shaping the outcome of this war? And this escalation, could it risk a prolonged war of attrition?
It is already becoming a prolonged war of attrition. While the Americans have done deep strikes, it is the ability, the geography that the Israelis possess, that they've been able to ensure security of a large number of their weapons and systems. And what is very, very important, one big lesson which has come out of this war is, if you indigenize and if you have geography on your side, then no amount of intelligence, very, very high level of intelligence also will never give the correct capability to your adversary. And so while Americans and Israelis kept saying that we have destroyed certain very high percentage of launchers and drones, we still find numbers, consistent drone attacks, which are surprising everybody. And so I think deep strikes are extremely important to create a favorable situation or control of air. At the same time, asymmetric warfare has brought out the difference between two sides. One is very highly capable, technologically very ahead, and the other side which has exploited its strengths to the weaknesses of the adversary. And a simple example I'll give is, Americans have been, as a philosophy, they have not used force protection as a very, very big measure. They always believed in kinetic defense or air defense. So they used THAAD or Patriots or other systems. And we found that the drones could get through and destroy an AWACS, destroy some of their tankers which were parked in the open. So kind of approach that the US has adopted has not been beneficial for it, because it gives a notion of victory to the Iranians, that they can create certain situations which provide them a kind of notion of victory, or as asymmetric strength or outcomes in its favor.
All right, sure. Finally, as a former chief of India's Strategic Forces Command, you've obviously overseen nuclear deterrence aspects. In this context, where nuclear facilities have been targeted and regional powers are also on high alert, Air Marshal, how important is credible deterrence, and what parallels or cautions do you think India should draw for its own security environment?
I think innovation, survivability, and ability to constantly, change your tactics and your processes is the only thing. It is Americans knew that Isfahan is there, they knew Fardo is there,
Yeah.
they knew Natanz is there. They went and bombed. But today even today, they find it difficult to identify and locate where are the 450 odd kgs of enriched uranium which the Iranians had,
Yeah,
which they had
yeah.
moved. And so it is the ability, if you have the ability to identify the windows that you have, to identify your own strengths in terms of geography, how you use it, how you use your own intellect, will make a difference in terms of survivability. And that is what the credibility of deterrence is. The
All right.
deterrence is credible only
Yeah.
if it is going, if I can use it when the time comes. Otherwise, it is not credible.
Yes. One final question before I let you go, Air Marshal. Looking ahead with reports of potential ground operations and diplomatic back channels and shifting alliances also in West Asia, what key military and strategic takeaways are there in this war for policymakers in our country and for other countries in the world who are watching it regarding jointness, theater level operations and balancing multi-alignment as the geopolitical landscape is rapidly changing, of course?
I think geopolitical alliances, India has always propagated or stood for strategic autonomy, and I think the Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign is designed for that because we know that we have already faced so many conflicts in our case, in our scenarios, and so we have seen, our experience is very clear that India will have to fight its battles or wars on its own. And so it's very, very important that we learn strategic and both operational lessons from these conflicts, what
Yeah.
is going on in Ukraine and what is going on in Iran. What is important is that Iran has been able to channelize its strengths, even though it was under a lot of sanctions. So we need to take that as a lesson that how we can leverage our strength that we have in terms of the scientific community, the research community, the academia, to ensure that we develop technologically. We have solutions which are cheap, which can be replicated in large numbers, because finally the quantity has a quality of its own. Mass is very, very important. Like we saw ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones that Iranians used. I would believe that we as a nation must continue to strive for technological advancements in the fields like dronery, in ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, hypersonic weapons, and finally have a very robust air defense. Like the Prime Minister had, laid out a roadmap kind of a thing for Mission Sudarshan Chakra. There are a lot of lessons for Mission Sudarshan Chakra which come out of this campaign, which is, however robust your air defenses could be, offensive air power is extremely, extremely important.
Yes.
Without offensive air power, Americans would not have been able to target 4,000 plus targets or neutralize them as they have done with the kind of freedom in air that they had. And so alliances are important in terms of technological advancements, but in our geostrategic milieu that we are in, I do not think that any other nation we should ever rely upon to help us in whenever the need comes. It is only in peacetime that we work with them, we build capacities, we build a good intelligence and other network, which will help us to do fight a war better and win on our own.
All right, definitely. Thanks very much for your assessment then, Air Marshal Kapoor, and for giving us your time here at NewsX. And viewers, we now take a very quick break. Stay tuned to NewsX.